The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe it.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
Soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, you are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you. The hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you. In company with our brave allies and brothers in arms on other fronts, you will bring about the destruction of the German war machine, the elimination of Nazi tyranny over the oppressed peoples of Europe, and security for ourselves in a free world. Your task will not be an easy one. Your enemy is well-trained, well-equipped, and battle-hardened. He will fight savagely. But this is the year 1944. Much has happened since the Nazi triumphs of 1940-41. The United Nations have inflicted upon the Germans great defeats in open battle, man to man. Our air offensive has seriously reduced their strength in the air and their capacity to wage war on the ground. Our home fronts have given us an overwhelming superiority in weapons and munitions of war, and placed at our disposal great reserves of trained fighting men. The tide has turned. The free men of the world are marching together to victory. I have full confidence in your courage, devotion to duty, and skill in battle. We will accept nothing less than full victory. Good luck, and let us all beseech the blessing of Almighty God upon this great and noble undertaking.
Good luck, everybody. Good luck. Oh, man. So tomorrow is actually D-Day. Tomorrow is the 75th anniversary of D-Day, but we begin to commemorate it today, except for our president, who decided to go to Ireland to promote his golf club. No, I'm not kidding. That's where he is. He's in Ireland. And you know what he was doing at 2 o'clock in the morning? He was tweeting at 2 a.m. in London. He was tweeting about Bette Midler. Bette Midler. That icon, Bette Midler, who's entertained troops herself, who has made movies to salute the people who came before her, who went to entertain troops for the boys. Overlooked, great movie. And he decided that on the eve of the beginning of the commemoration of the 75th anniversary of D-Day, which makes me think of my dad all day today, all day this morning. You know, it was weird. I was sitting at my computer and I thought Howard left because he said goodbye and gave me a kiss. And I thought he left. And then I was sitting at my computer, and I like for my computers to face the wall so there's no distractions. And so the door is always behind me. And so I saw something move, a big man move behind me. And I thought it was my dad, but it was Howard. So, you know, he was on my mind all day today. And I actually, you know, I looked up his grave, and, you know, my dad, when he died, what he wanted on his grave and what is on his grave is his name, a Jewish star, Army, World War II veteran. That is what my father wanted on his grave, and that is what is on my father's grave. And you know, the four most dangerous missions, I don't even know if everybody appreciates like what D-Day was. D-Day was a massive casualty loss. We fought D-Day with I believe, you know, it's somewhat disputed, but if you want to know why it's called D-Day, D apparently stands for day. When you look at some historians, there might be somebody in the audience that has a different opinion about that, but as far as I know, I always thought D stood for day. Day. I don't know. But so what it was an invasion of the Allied troops. Who were the Allied troops? We fought with Britain, okay, where Donald Trump just wore the most embarrassing outfits in the history of outfits. I don't know what's going on with his clothes. I mean, it's he you know, and if we had Donald Trump as president instead of Roosevelt, and you know, the voice there in that clip was the Allied Supreme Commander, who was General Eisenhower, who went on to become our president. But if we would have had Trump during these days, he probably would have said something along the lines of, there are good people on both sides. Yeah, let that sink in for a minute, okay? But what D-Day was we fought with the Brits, we fought with the Canadians, and the United States. We were the Allied troops. And France had become occupied by the Nazis. And so what we did was we needed to get a foothold on continental Europe. And D-Day was the beginning of getting our foothold in Europe. And so we invaded with about 160, some people say 156, about 160,000 Allied troops into Nazi-occupied France. It started tomorrow, June 6, 1944, and it was the largest seaborne invasion in history, and it was a major turning point in World War II, but it did come with a catastrophic human toll. You know, no one knows exactly how many people died, but it's about 4,000 Americans and Allied forces. It's about 4,000 Germans. And D-Day actually lasted, well, the invasion, was a day, but then the actual campaign lasted for about 3 months. And we lost there were about 20,000 French people who were killed. So this is the beginning of the commemoration of this invasion that began 75 years ago, where hundreds of thousands of Allied and Axis soldiers, and of course, Germany was and civilians died. They were wounded. The greatest risks in this operation were borne by our American troops. They did everything from storm the beaches at Normandy, stormed Omaha Beach, stormed Utah Beach, climbed cliffs to expose German artillery. Operations, where German artillery had been up on the cliffs. They set up the African American troops. It was a segregated war. One of the groups, I want to get it right. Yeah, it was the 320th Balloon Barrage Battalion. Now, these combat troops, they landed on Utah Beach, and they set up these key lines of defense to prevent the Luftwaffe, the raiders, from strafing the army and the troops and the supply chains that were going to come in. Because we knew that as soon as the landings began, that the German air attacks would start, and it would be a major threat to, the troops arriving in the thousands. And we came in, on landing crafts, and so to defend against the air raids, they turned to defensive weaponry units. There were 621 African-American soldiers in the 320th Barrage Balloon Battalion. These guys, they did an amazing thing. They had to land with 125-pound blimps. They worked in teams to anchor those blimps to the ground. Every blimp was filled with hydrogen, and they were connected to these small bombs that could denote if enemy aircraft that could detonate if enemy aircraft made contact with the cables. So they came ashore on Utah Beach. There were about 150 landing crafts on the morning of June 6th. And they faced the same dangers that the infantry did, but their added heavy lift came because they had to bring in these really stinking heavy cables and these balloons that they had to set up on the beach. They set up these barrage balloons. They dug trenches to take cover for themselves, and then their fellow soldiers invaded. This is why the 101st Airborne and the 82nd Airborne are so famous. Those were the earliest paratroopers of the U.S. Army, the 101st and the 82nd Airborne. These guys literally paratrooped. They jumped and they jumped from airplanes in really bad weather. It was freezing freaking cold below, in the dark, facing these unrelenting attacks, okay? Some of them refer to these guys as the Pathfinders. Others refer to them as the Screaming Eagles. But these were the first guys in, and they weren't out to engage in combat. They were supposed to set up the lights. That's why they're called Pathfinders. They were to set up lights and flares and mark the drop zones. But these guys paid a heavy price.
all things Randy at randyrhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
You were not able to serve in Vietnam because of a bone spur condition in your feet. Do you wish you'd been able to serve? Would you like to have served your country?
Well, I was never a fan of that war, I'll be honest with you. I thought it was a terrible war. I thought it was very far away. Nobody ever, you're talking about Vietnam, and at that time, nobody ever heard of the country. Today, they're doing very well. In fact, on trade, they are brutal. They're very brutal. They're great negotiators. They're great business people. But nobody heard of Vietnam, and they say, what are we doing? So many people dying. What is happening over there? So I was never a fan. This isn't like I'm fighting against Nazi Germany. We're fighting against Hitler. And I was like a lot of people. Now, I wasn't out in the streets marching. I wasn't saying, I'm going to move to Canada, which a lot of people did. But no, I was not a fan of that war. That war was not something
would
that
you like
we should
to
have
serve
been involved
generally, perhaps in another?
I would not have minded that at all. I would have been honored, but I think I'd make up for it right now. I look, $700 billion I gave last year, and then this year $716 billion. And I think I'm making up for it rapidly because we're rebuilding our military at a level that it's never seen before.
He is such an idiot. He's so, the man goes to England. Oh, I hope his bone spurs don't act up. It's very damp, could be painful for the bone spurs, which he does not have, okay? And again, if Trump would have been the president during the time of Mussolini, Hitler, and Franco, he would have said that there were some good people on all sides. He would have said that. That would have been his position. Because you know what, his love for Putin and Kim, he would have been smitten with Hitler. He would have been smitten with Mussolini, because this man is a combination of like Hitler's personal warmth and Mussolini's quiet dignity. That's who this man is. So, you've got these commemoration ceremonies going on today, and you've got all these veterans in their 90s, and their old uniforms fit better than this man's wardrobe now. It's just, I know fat people like to dress baggy. I get it. I'm wearing a baggy ass shirt today because I feel bloated. I get it. I understand. But why does he have to look like he's wearing a tarp all the time? What is that? Just go ahead and wear robes to fit in with your Saudi buddies. Oh, I can't stand him. He just irritates me. Why didn't you go to Vietnam? Well, it was so far away. It was so far away and no one ever heard of the country. Veterans deal with issues that, and I'm not talking about just veterans, I'm talking about combat veterans like my dad. I told you, I can't stop thinking about him today. He was part of he wasn't, in the 101st or the 82nd, he was in the Army, he was in the infantry. But my father was brutally wounded in World War II. When he came back, he was not the same man who left. A fun guy from Brooklyn who fell in love with my mother. His entire life changed because of the things that you see and the decisions that you make and the losing of buddies. Somebody standing next to you, somebody in a foxhole gets picked off, and you're right freaking there. These are things nobody wants to talk about. Everybody loves to talk about, the Band of Brothers and the heroism, and that's part of it too. It is part of it. But the story, the dirty underbelly of war is the moral damage, the psychological damage, the way men come home, and now women come home with holes in them, literally. And I don't mean from bullets, I mean from the experience. Big, giant, gaping holes, and no one wants to talk about it. I will say, in World War II, this is just unbelievable. How in World War II we had like 14% of the people living in the United States who participated in World War II. And then in Vietnam, I think we had like 10%. And now, do you know how many people participate in our endless, ongoing, undercovered, never discussed wars? 0.86% of us are involved in any way in the military. And this man is going to say, oh, it's too far away. The experience is that far away and 40 years ago, and there are people and who live with us side by side at the coffee maker today, at the Walmart, greeting you, all kinds of people who walk around with these emotional scars, but it's too far away for him. He just, and let me tell you something. Before he talked about, well, you know, it was so far away. I didn't approve of it. I didn't know where it was. And before he went to Ireland to promote his freaking golf club instead of being in Normandy, he trashed John McCain again. He was asked about his feud with John McCain, and he actually lied about that too. Oh, I don't have a feud with him. Well, he's dead. I don't have a feud with him. People ask me about him, and I'm so honest. He didn't know about the White House office of the military reaching out to the Navy in Tokyo, telling them to minimize the visibility of the USS John McCain. He didn't know about it. His White House office did it.
Not a personal thing. I knew Senator John McCain well. I liked him. I respected him. I quite enjoyed your battle with him when he was alive. You would give it to him, he'd give it to you, and it went on. It seems a little beneath you, if you don't mind me saying, that now he's dead, you're carrying on attacking him. Is it not time to let it go?
No, I don't attack him. People ask me, like you're asking me. I didn't bring his name up, you did.
Sure.
You brought his name up, John McCain.
Oh, my God.
I'm not attacking him at all. I don't think about him. I was not a fan. I didn't like what he did to health care. I didn't like how he handled the veterans because I got him choice. He was always unable. He was on committees that he could have done.
But he is dead, Mr. President. I mean, there has to come a time, isn't there?
Excuse me, but Piers, you're asking me a question.
Sure.
If you don't ask me about John McCain, I would never talk to him.
I agree.
Somebody asked me the same question the other day.
But I'm asking because you know the battleship thing last week where, you know, there's
But I knew nothing about that. I'm not even sure it happened.
I'm not even sure it happened. I'm not even sure it happened. The Navy confirmed it. There were emails clearly describing what the White House asked the Navy to do about the visibility of the USS John McCain, that the sailors on the USS John McCain were disinvited from the president's speech because he didn't want to see the baseball caps that said USS John McCain. He's not even sure it happened. Please, dear God, do not call me, do not tweet me, do not write me, do not do anything with me with regard to this president being somebody that should be president, okay? And what is this? Oh, I never brought him up. You bring him up at stump speeches. You bring him up at your stupid campaign rallies. You bring him up all the freaking time. You tell the United States of America that the reason why you don't like him is because the Steele dossier was given to him by Chris Steele, and he showed it to Lindsey Graham, who said, give it to the FBI. You've said that out loud. The man has passed away. And now he says any trade deal with the UK, they want their National Health Service destroyed. He wants it on the table. He's not satisfied with destroying health care for Americans. Now he's doing it to other countries who have had universal coverage for generations. I don't know who he thinks he is, but he is an international disgrace. He is a failure as a human being and a total failure as a man.
Call in, connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844.
561-270-3844. Next, I want to ask you about your military. Is this week you tweeted your support for the LGBT community around the world where they're being persecuted or excluded.
It's terrible.
Which does prompt the obvious question. If you feel that protective of the LGBT community, why did you feel the need to ban transgender people from serving in the US military?
Because they take massive amounts of drugs. They have to. And also, and you're not allowed to take drugs. You know, in the military, you're not allowed to take any drugs. You take an aspirin.
What?
And they have to. After the operation, they have to. They have no choice. They have to. And that you would actually have to break rules and regulations in order to have that.
But the cost of the medication is minuscule compared to the overall budget, right?
You
accept that.
The
US military spends a lot more money, for example, on giving Viagra to service men and women, or service men.
I didn't know that.
Than it does actually on medical bills for transgender people.
That?
And so it just seems to me an unnecessary thing for a guy who wants to be supportive of LGBT rights and the community around the world, that you've taken this action.
Well, it is what it is. Look, massive amounts. And also, people were going in and then asking for the operation. And the operation is $200,000, $250,000. And getting the operation, the recovery period is long, and they have to take large amounts of drugs after that, for whatever reason, but large amounts. And that's not the way it is. I mean, you can't do that. So I said, yeah, when it came time to making a decision on that, and because of the drugs, and also because of the cost of the operation, people were going in.
Transgender people in the U.S. military have won serious gallantry awards.
Yeah.
What do you feel about?
Well, I'm proud of them. I think it's great, but you have to have a standard, and you have to stick by that standard. And we have a great military, and I want to keep it that way. And maybe they'd be phenomenal. I think they probably would be. But again, you have very strict rules and regulations on drugs and prescription drugs and all of these different things, and they blow it out of the water.
He just makes crap up. This is the commander-in-chief. When it's pointed out to him that we spend more money on Viagra for men in the military than it would cost to give somebody hormones, which is what massive amount of drugs. It's hormone therapy is what it is. I mean, what do you think it costs, Mr. President, to put a man back together again after he's been blown to smithereens? What do you think that costs? I mean, this man is so dense. We have had transgender people in the military. They serve with honor and distinction, same as anybody in the military. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, this guy is like, he's such a throwback. He's such an ignoramus. You know, the Queen gave a perfect gift to Donald Trump. She gave him an abridged version of Winston Churchill's book, The Second World War, because he's an idiot. So she gave him the abridged version because she thought he was a moron. She gave a speech about World War II and about how the Western Alliance has kept us safe for 70 years. And he fell asleep because he didn't do Adderall. Talking about drugs. He didn't do Adderall. Somebody told him, you got to give a speech. Don't embarrass us on the world stage. Go without the Adderall. Read from this paper. And he literally fell asleep while the Queen was toasting him. He literally fell asleep. This man, I mean, and then at 2 o'clock in the morning, last night, 2 o'clock in the morning, he's tweeting like a 9th grade mean girl against Bette Midler, for God's sake. Bette Midler is top of mind for him. He called her a washed up psycho. Are you freaking kidding me? She is a national treasure. Do not trash Bette Midler to me. That is a bridge too far. She retweeted an embarrassing quote from Trump that turned out to be made up, and she, hours later, said, I don't know how I missed this. This is not true. I apologize. And he decided to tweet at her that she's a washed up psycho and she's a scammer. Bette Midler is the scammer. Bette Midler. She does Broadway shows at 70. 70. She looks freaking fabulous. You're like the same age. Look at you and look at her. Look at you. Look at her. You have the face and the physique you deserve, and so does she. Unbelievable. 70 years old. She's doing Broadway shows. You know how hard that is? Do you have any idea? It's like a show a day every single day with costumes and costume changes and dancing and dialogue and 2 shows on Saturday. Really? Really? Bette Midler at 2 o'clock in the morning in London, a day ahead of the commemorations of the 75th anniversary. I mean, this guy is a real estate scammer calling Bette Midler some sort of a scam. I mean, this guy would float phony rumors that the British royals were living in Trump properties to the point where the British royals had to come out and correct him. Because the British royals don't need to launder money. Oh, my God. I can't. When are we going to get rid of this man? Joe. Oh, I'm sorry. Joe in Oakland.
It's Joe in Oakland Park. Hi, Randy.
Oh, hi.
Listen, this is a little bit off topic now, but D-Day stood for Disembarkation Day.
Well, okay, so I'm just going to, I'm not going to argue with you because nobody knows. Nobody knows. That's the thing.
No, that's the official thing.
No, it's not.
Yeah, it is.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Mm-mm. No.
All right, I'm not going to argue with you either.
Yeah, I mean, nobody knows.
I was in the Navy. My father was in the Navy, and that's what it meant.
No, my father was in the infantry in World War II, and he doesn't know what it meant. Nobody knows what it means. The historians don't know what it means.
Yes, they do. But anyway, that's what it meant.
It did.
And, yeah.
No.
All right, hon. Whatever.
It's a day that will live in infamy, obviously. Everybody knows. And you know what? I shouldn't say that because I think we only have about 500,000 World War II vets that are still around. And in 10 years, we're going to have like less than, 20,000 of them. So this kind of Allied intervention into a fascist system of brutality and extermination, it has to be seared into the memory of every young person in this country, because, my dad's gone. A lot of people, their grandparents were the ones who were in World War II, and we're losing them. Yeah, so you know what? People need to know about all the things that happened that led up to this conquering of Europe by a fascist, a bunch of fascist dictators in Europe. And they also have to know what America and our allies did to beat it back so that, and to not forget it, because if you forget it, it will repeat itself. So whatever it is to you, it could be Disembarkation Day or Day or whatever it is, just remember what caused it so it will never happen again.
Well, I am like you. I'm a Jew, and I certainly know a lot about it. And I think we have a guy in the White House who's
sick.
The Randi Rhodes Show is live on RandiRhodes.com and the free Progressive Voices app for Android and iOS. Visit the App Store or ProgressiveVoices.com now.
When I talk to Democrats in competitive districts, swing districts, those like yourself who flipped districts this last cycle, they often tell me, and when I say why aren't you there yet, they say that what they're hearing from constituents is they don't want us to focus on impeachment or the Russia investigation, the Mueller report. They want you to focus on the agenda, healthcare, the opioid crisis, you name it. For those members, what's your message to them?
Well, I'm not trying to persuade anybody else. I'm trying to do what I think is right. But I can tell you that folks in my district absolutely want me to focus on infrastructure, on health care, and on gun violence. And they don't see any contradiction between doing that and also standing up for the rule of law and checks and balances. I campaigned on both. And, the notion that we can just ignore everything that's happening, this freak show at the White House.
Freak show.
It's just not realistic. It's like saying that, I'm so focused on remodeling my kitchen that I'm not going to pay attention to my house catching fire.
Ha!
We do have a constitutional duty to do both. The House of Representatives has done a great job on health care and on infrastructure and gun violence. We can do this as well.
Thank you, Tim Malinowski from New Jersey. Yes, they can do both. In fact, they did do both. This is pretty amazing. Yesterday, the House passed the Dream and Promise Act, something, just so you know, in 2013, we had comprehensive immigration reform. Remember that? In the Senate. We had the Gang of Eight. You had bipartisan agreement on a comprehensive immigration reform package of changes to the law, how to deal with asylum seekers, money for border security, et cetera, et cetera. And it died because at that time the House was in Republican hands and they didn't want to introduce it. Well, the opposite has happened. Here you have the House in Democratic hands. Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats put forward the Dream and Promise Act, which is the DACA and the TPS, temporary protected status, people living in this country who are living under complete and utter fear of deportation with this, a freak show of a president. And so they were able yesterday to pass a piece of legislation that would give those people a path to citizenship. Not a citizenship card, just a path to citizenship if they don't break the law. You can't even have a ticket for jaywalking and stay in that class of dreamers that now have a path to citizenship, just so you know. So these are, America's best and brightest. These are the kids that came here through no fault of their own. These are the kids that did everything right. These are the kids that went to school, educated themselves, are now teaching in our schools, and the House literally passed this with 7 Republicans joining them.
The bill is passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
Woohoo! That was beautiful. That was absolutely beautiful. And now it will go to the Senate to die because the Grim Reaper, Mitch McConnell, will never, ever bring it up. But it passed 237 to 187. There were 7 Republicans that voted yes. All it does is create a new legal pathway for young, undocumented immigrants brought to the United States as children through no fault of their own. And it also protects the people with temporary protected status. Now, who are those people? Those are immigrants whose countries are ravaged by violence or natural disasters. And, of course, it will die in the Senate. Sad, right? Neil in L.A.
Hi, Randy. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm very good. I've been a fan of yours for many, many years since Air America, and you're my North Star. So I was listening, and I listen religiously, and I heard that there was a dispute over what D-Day stands for.
Yeah.
And it's something that, quite honestly, I'm a result of. And my father was one of the people that planned D-Day.
Oh, really?
He was an American Army officer who came over to England, met my mother, and that's why I say I'm a result of that. But literally it stands for day. Because
that's what
my father was.
I had always heard that it just simply stands for day, and that
because they didn't want to give any clue as to what it really meant.
Right. And so then the day before today was known as D1. And that's why
D-1.
Yes, D-1, and that's why we celebrate or commemorate. We shouldn't say celebrate, but we commemorate the sacrifice today. And then the days after were D+1, D+2, D+3, like that. So that's what I'd always heard. Right. Disembarkation, I think, is for cruise lines.
Right. Yes, exactly. There was a lot more going on than just disembarking.
Yes,
I mean,
there was.
You had planes flying and bombing and so on.
Yeah.
But yeah, my dad was part of a group. My father was in Normandy 6 months prior to D-Day.
Wow.
Doing reconnaissance. And he was actually in the battle on Utah Beach.
Oh, my God.
He was, so I studied it all my life. He's buried in Arlington. The country honored him amazingly.
Who is your father, if you don't mind saying?
Well, he's one of the many, many people that history doesn't record. He was at the time he was a major, Julius Blatt. He was the youngest lieutenant colonel in the American Army at age 27.
Oh wow! Oh my God, 27. That is young for a colonel.
But that's what was so amazing. And he always used to refer to the fact that he went to Columbia University when he was 16, so he was never a contemporary with his peers.
He was a brainiac. He was a big brain.
And that's why he ended up in the position he was in, and he was working for Eisenhower and all of them. I mean, in fact, there was, I don't know how widely known it is, but Operation Overlord was the general name for the operation.
Yes.
But somebody leaked information about the name and what its purpose was, and Eisenhower created a much smaller group of people that were called bigoted. They were bigots. They were B-I-G-O-T. And if you were a bigot, you were the highest level of security clearance. Now, the reason they used bigot was because in the North Africa landings, all the artillery and everything was marked to Gibraltar. So they reversed it, and they came up with bigot.
That's where my
look up bigot.
That's where my dad was. That's where my dad started.
North Africa?
Yes, he's got that 3-continent medal, my dad. There's a medal.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and he also has a Bronze Star for conspicuous gallantry. But yeah, your dad sounds amazing.
Well, after D-Day, he ended up joining up with Patton and went with the Third Army all the way to Berlin. He went behind enemy lines a second time.
Oh, this is going to be crazy. My dad was in the Third Army, so you know what? Wouldn't that be weird if they knew?
Well, he was head of the combat engineers.
Oh my
for
God!
The Third Army. Mm-hmm.
Oh my God! Wow, I would love to explore that and find out if they knew. I mean, I have a book of my dad's unit. I'm going to look for your dad in it.
Yeah, I mean, it was very. I mean, he stayed in England after the war, and with my mother, and I lived there. I had American citizenship, so I came here when I was 21.
Wow.
Well, yeah, and he eventually made brigadier general.
Oh, wow.
But I mean, when I hear these stories, he used to love taking me to see, Battle of the Bulge, The Longest Day, all the different war movies, and he would, educate me as to what was going on, and he loved them. And they must have been awful in terms of their rendition of what happened, but he loved them.
Yeah. My dad too.
But when he saw the opening scenes of Saving Private Ryan, he got physically sick because he remembered it so clearly because it was so vivid. He couldn't watch it.
That's amazing.
But he lived to be 85. He lived a full life.
That's a beautiful thing. Well, thank you,
anyway.
Neil. Thank you for sharing that. I am so excited to go home and see if I could find a connection between your dad and my dad, because that is amazing. My dad was in the Third Army.
And the other thing I should let you know, he was Jewish.
Oh, really? Oh, wow. That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Mary had a little man.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe me. Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
Okay. Oh my goodness. Oh, happy day.
To 2006, when around the country, thousands of young dreamers took to the streets, 500,000 people in the city of Dallas, hundreds of thousands in Los Angeles, in California, in New York, in Florida, in Chicago, to demand change. to ask that their government acknowledge them as fully American. This is a culmination of that hard work. This is a message to them that your government is listening to you and is trying to make change.
And today we will take a significant step, not the final step, but a significant step in saying that America continues to be a land of opportunity, a welcoming, tolerant land that believes its diversity is its strength. And so we will go to the floor. We will pass this bill.
Yes.
We will send it to the Senate. And then we'll keep on keeping on until it is the law of the land. God bless.
So that was a little presser that they had just ahead of the vote yesterday on H.R. 6. Now, I told you that when Nancy Pelosi became Speaker of the House, there was legislation that had been laid out as the way forward. It was H.R. 1 through 10. Right? H.R. 8 was the gun legislation. H.R. 1 was a election protection bill. It was also a clean government bill, clean elections bill. It had limits on dark money. It had, disclosure requirements. It had a whole bunch, and all these things. So this was H.R. 6 from the H.R. 1 through 10 batch. And they are passing these really important pieces of legislation. And of course, then they go over to the Senate and die. And you should only know that, these red state, representatives like Mike Rogers of Alabama, he described the DREAM and Promise Act as rewarding illegals rather than securing our borders. These are some sick and twisted people, and the reason why it will die in the Senate is not because there isn't a comprehensive immigration reform package that could garner enough votes from Republicans along with Democrats. No, the reason why it will die in the Senate is because Donald Trump wants the issue. He wants the issue. This is a very high-performing issue for him, because there is agreement and has been agreement in this country for nary 6 years now, bipartisan, comprehensive immigration reform that exists, already written. And the president said he would veto this DREAM and Promise Act as well. So Mitch McConnell is not going to take it up in the Senate. And that is just plain old sick. And it's all because Donald Trump wants the issue of immigration to be something that eats at America, and he can declare emergencies. He can reapportion money, reappropriate money. He can take money from the military, from their construction budget, and he thinks he can reappropriate it without Congress because he's declared an emergency, which the courts have said there is no emergency. So, no matter who you talk to, it doesn't matter what their opinion anymore is about whether or not there's an emergency at the border. The courts have said there is no emergency. They said that there is an influx. They said that there is a problem in Central America, that there is violence in Central America, and that America is completely able and prepared to deal with it. And therefore, there is no emergency. And they know there's no emergency because they used Donald Trump's own words to show there was no emergency. An emergency means your house is on fire. An emergency means we've been attacked or, there's aliens landing in Missouri. That would be an emergency. But they said because Donald Trump was campaigning on this issue as early as 2015, you couldn't possibly define what is going on at the border as an emergency. It wouldn't meet the definition in Webster's. So this is all a lie. And I've been telling you about this little private teen prison we got going on here in Florida in Homestead. The old Homestead Air Force Base has been repurposed and now tasked with being a private teen prison. And the Office of Refugee Resettlement, which is responsible for the lives and well-being of these children who fall under federal law requires that when you are a minor in the care and custody of the United States, that you receive essential services, meaning these kids get classes, they have education while they're waiting to be sponsored by a relative or while they're waiting to be reunified with a parent. These kids are in our custody. And this teen prison is now threatening to end the classes, the school. We run they're legally obligated to schooling these kids, to giving them classes. And we teach English, we teach math, whatever. Teenage, middle school subjects. And they are now going to violate federal law again by denying these kids classes and PE, physical, we used to call it gym. This is sick. This is twisted. And so, you've got, the ICE chief saying that he's going to target more families for deportation. And so, these kids are going to have to stay in the little teen prison. And he's saying, well, we're running out of money. We're running out of money. And so we don't think school is directly necessary for the protection of life and safety. We don't think education, legal services, or recreation is part of essential services. This is U.S. Health and Human Services spokesman Mark Weber saying this. And so now you got, people that are going to bring a lawsuit. Carlos Holguin, he's a lawyer who represents minors in a long-running lawsuit. He got a settlement in 1997 that sets basic standards of care for children in our custody. And he actually, education, PE, food, water, safety, security. These are all essential services. He said, you know what? We'll see them in court if they go through with this. He said, what are they going to withhold next? Drinking water, food? What is it? What kind of torture do they? And of course, I told you in El Paso, you've got people in shelters that are suitable for maybe 75, 100 people. There are 900 people in this shelter. 900 people. And they're standing on toilets. You got women that are now giving birth and they're being shackled by the hands and feet and sometimes across the belly. And then when they do give birth, we take the baby. What kind of country is this? We're trying to commemorate D-Day and the sacrifice that the greatest generation made on our behalf to beat back fascism. And there are people that don't even understand how it happened or what the warning signs are, and separating women and children, separating babies from their mothers, literally infants, literally newborns from their mothers, not allowing their mothers to breastfeed, telling teenagers that they don't get education, holding them in custody in places where they have to stand on a toilet in order to breathe. We have 12,500 children in federal shelters nationwide as of April. I think we can manage 12,500 children. I think we can. We're a nation of 350 million people. Now, all these kids are waiting for is a sponsor, usually a relative. And they're waiting in these shelters, and they study math, and they study English, and they attend school, and they participate in extracurricular activities like soccer, baseball, other sports, sometimes even something as small as ping pong. And now they're going to withhold that from these kids. HHS sent an email Thursday to shelters across the country saying we're not going to pay for education or for the teachers.
All things Randy at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
Exclusive new video shows Customs and Border Protection Acting Commissioner John Sanders in the back of this black SUV as he arrived at the border today. He shied away from CNN's cameras and declined an interview as he and his team were given a tour. Sanders was on scene as this large group of migrants was processed by Border Patrol, many of them teenage boys. Likely unaware that mere hours beforehand in Washington, the acting Homeland Security Secretary told Congress there's no more room for them.
HHS does not have enough funding for bed space for teenage males, and that's the main arriving unaccompanied child right now.
Sanders' visit comes as the deaths of both a 16-year-old boy and a 10-year-old girl in U.S. custody make headlines this week. The teen was found unresponsive Monday morning at a Texas Border Patrol station, just 1 week after arriving from Guatemala.
He was both screened and offered medical care, and we're going to look forward to the findings of the Inspector General to see if we could do better.
The 10-year-old girl passed away in September, according to the Department of Health and Human Services. But her death was not made public until after CBS News reported it Wednesday night. A department spokesperson says she had a history of congenital heart defects when she arrived in San Antonio last March. She was then transferred to a nursing facility in Phoenix, and then again to a children's hospital in Omaha, where she died on September 29th.
Oh, my God.
In the 10 years before this, not a single child died in the custody of the border. Now 6 children have died in the last several months.
This woman from Honduras told us migrants are not only battling the elements on the journey, but also illness, noting sickness spreads quickly in large groups.
Great. 6 kids died in our custody, and in the 10 years prior, no kids died in our custody. Something is horribly, horribly wrong. And to pass comprehensive immigration reform with this Senate, it's just a pipe dream. It's a pipe dream. And you know what? We only need 4 senators to take the Senate, and I believe there are 20 or 22 Republicans on the ballot in 2020. Please make a note of it. All I want to do is live in the 21st century. That's all I want to do. Drew in Rochester.
Hi, Randy.
Hi.
The point you just brought up, I just figured this out. With the kids now being threatened with denial of basic services by the Homeland Security, have them imprisoned. Isn't this a form of child abuse?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's as plain as day.
Yes, it's as plain as day, and that's why I'm trying to explain to people this is how it looks when you live in a country that is leaning towards fascism or autocracy or oligarchy. These prisons, by the way, are run for profit. How about taking the profit motive out of these teenage jails? And, following the federal law that says that if you're a child in our custody, then you have to be provided essential services, which do include school and do include playing outside.
Yes, I agree with you, ma'am.
Okay,
thank you.
You're welcome. This is so sad and so wrong. There's a profit motive built into this, and they're saying, we don't have the money. Well, then cut your profit margin or take the profit motive out of it. They are literally abusing the most vulnerable people on the planet, children. Children don't do anything illegal. Kelly in Albuquerque.
Hello, Randy.
Hi.
How you doing? How you doing?
Good.
Good. Look, what more can I say about Trump? He's just a real joker. You can't fake bone spurs, can you? I mean, once you have them, you don't get rid of them, right?
It's very damp where he is. I just hope they're not hurting him today.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
I mean, my dad. I admire your dad for fighting in D-Day, which tomorrow is the D-Day anniversary. God bless him for that. And my dad
wasn't in D-Day. My dad was, in Patton's Third Army. My dad was not part of this invasion. I believe, my dad was in North Africa. What D-Day was the first foothold on the continent of Europe. That was clearing the way for my dad to then enter into Europe. These guys were the first. They were the first guys to set foot in France. They were the first guys to set foot in Europe. This was, this was the first guys that landed, the paratroopers. They were called the Pathfinders because they were supposed to go and they were supposed to light the way. They delivered flares and they lit the drop zones for the equipment so that the artillery guys could come in. That's what that was.
God bless them.
Yeah,
God bless them. They were awesome.
They took heavy casualties. These guys. These were these were the bravest of the brave. This was the 101st Airborne and the 82nd Airborne.
Amen, girl.
Yeah,
Amen.
Yeah.
But I just want to say about amen. You know, my dad fought in Korea, and he, this is years later here, but he almost got his feet blown off here by, not at the same time, but so I did to compare it to what Trump faked. There's no comparison. I mean, Trump is just so disrespectful of the military.
Oh, he has no idea. He doesn't have any sense of it. He thinks that because he went to a military-themed prep skill, that somehow he served in the military. I mean, that's how delusional and ill-informed and unwilling to learn he is. This choice thing that he keeps on, I got the vet. No, that happened under Barack Obama. I mean, the man is a degenerate, congenital liar. He has always been a liar. He is nothing more than a liar. He is a failure as a man. He is the baby daddy to 5 babies by 3 different women. He is a person that, believes he should go around grabbing people, uninvited. He's a disrespectful lout. He's a embarrassment to the United States of America. And all he's doing today on D-1 day, which is what this is sitting in Ireland promoting a freaking golf club he owns there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. What,
I mean, if he wasn't so disgusting and mean, I'd feel sorry for him because he's just a big black hole. I mean, he doesn't have any compassion. I don't think he can feel love. I don't think he can give love. I don't think he understands anything about being a human being. I don't think the human experience just kind of skipped him.
Well, I'd sure like to see him either impeached or thrown out of office in 2020.
I want him impeached. I want him impeached. I want him impeached now. And let me tell you something.
Yeah.
If impeachment was not built for this man, tell me who it was built for.
Exactly. Thank you, Randy.
You're welcome. Thank you. I honestly, if the founding fathers didn't have in mind a corrupt crap bag of a president like this when they crafted the impeachment clause of the Constitution, if they didn't have in mind a man who thought he was a king, a man who refused to obey the law, a man who lied to the American people constantly, a man who enriched himself with emoluments from foreign governments, a man who benefited from the intrusion of a foreign government's military intelligence operations, welcomed it, celebrated it, and asked for even more help in public in front of your face. If they didn't have him in mind when they wrote impeachment into the Constitution, tell me what they had in mind.
Call in, connect. To speak to Randy, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
We should consider the power of inherent contempt, an old doctrine that allows the Congress itself to issue a summons, an arrest warrant to an official and demand that they appear at a congressional hearing, be subject to fines, to jail time. I think we ought to explore contracting with area correctional institutions, provide some additional support for our sergeant-at-arms so the White House will get the message that we are serious.
I love that. That's Lloyd Doggett of Texas, Democrat of Texas. We should use inherent contempt. Yesterday at the end of the show, I explained the 3 different types of contempt. There was criminal contempt, which the House would vote, the whole House would vote, and then it would be a contempt referral. That referral would go to a U.S. attorney, and a U.S. attorney would then have a task to convene a grand jury and then hear it that way. That is a slow go. Obviously, Bill Barr would prohibit a U.S. attorney from doing that, from convening a grand jury. He would have to make the argument, obviously, and it would be another constitutional crisis that was brought upon us by Bill Barr, who is an absolute disaster. That man is a disgrace. But that won't work. So then you have civil contempt where they go to the court and they hope that the court would expedite it, and the court would then be able to do fines, right? Because a civil court is money damages only. It's not a criminal court. It's just a place where you go to get money damages. And perhaps the civil court would then fine people who were in violation of these subpoenas that Congress has issued for, like, Don McGahn and Hope Hicks and, you know, a whole bunch of people. Annie Donaldson, the chief of staff to Don McGahn, you know, that kind of thing. And that's a slow go-to because whoever loses would then appeal it, and on it would go until it got to the Supreme Court. So now you're looking at years. You're looking at months or years, even expedited. You're looking at months or years. So my choice is inherent contempt, which is a tool that Congress actually has that the Supreme Court's already ruled on and says, yes, Congress has an inherent right to hold its own trial, not an impeachment inquiry, not an impeachment trial of the president, but a trial for contempt of Congress's own subpoenas. And that would be something they could start immediately. They could show the evidence of the subpoena. They could show the evidence of the claim of executive privilege that Donald Trump has made in a blanket fashion, and how there is no executive privilege that he's entitled to because he allowed all these witnesses to talk to Mueller, waiving executive privilege. You might remember Bill Barr when he addressed the American people 68 days before he allowed Mueller to say anything. He told the American people that the president was waiving executive privilege and making the report public, right? Right. So there is no claim of executive privilege. It is a empty, hollow argument that they're making that holds absolutely no weight at all in law. So I'm all about inherent contempt. That's what Lloyd Doggett there is talking about. Now, you know, on Tuesday, on Monday, the House is going to have its first hearing. They won't be calling it an impeachment inquiry hearing. It will just be kind of a historical hearing about previous impeachments. John Dean, who was Don McGahn in the Nixon administration, he was the White House counsel. John Dean actually went to jail. And trust me, the Republicans, when John Dean testifies, I can't wait. The Republicans are going to say, why should we believe you? You went to jail. You're a criminal. Right. You watch this. They're going to denigrate John Dean, the White House counsel to Nixon, who refused to cover up for Richard Nixon. Refused. And so that's going to be a hearing that we have on Monday. But on Tuesday, the House is going to take a vote on a contempt referral, except they're going to vote on a civil contempt referral. That's what they've decided to do. I think it's a huge mistake. I think it's a very big waste of time. I think it's going to take a lot of time. I don't think it's effective. I don't know why they're doing it, but they did say for everyone to hear that civil contempt does not preclude, meaning it doesn't wipe away the option of also using inherent contempt. So my conclusion is that they want to seem like, or they actually believe that, they should exhaust all remedies before they hold their own trial in the House, which would be a function of inherent contempt. But I just want you to know they'd have to take a separate vote. That's just how it works. The House is going to vote on a civil contempt referral on Tuesday for Don McGahn and Bill Barr. Civil. And they're going to try to appeal to a civil court for damages, for fines, for a money remedy for each day that these people refuse to testify. Now, great. But inherent contempt is a separate vote, and that would mean that the House could actually have its own trial and that they could try the crime of contempt of Congress right there in the House of Representatives. You don't need the Senate for anything. Nothing. And that's what I would like to see done. But it's not on the docket, you know. It's right now it's And you know, the idea that Democrats who are for it, right now there's almost 60. Now we have 230 in the House. there are almost 60 who are for impeachment. So it's growing. The more everybody gets to know, the more the American people wake up to the Mueller report, wake up to the obstruction of justice, wake up to the fact that this claim of Bill Barr's that there was no evidence of a collusion, that is a flat out lie. There was a lot of evidence of collusion, meaning contacts and coordination between, let's say, Paul Manafort handing off polling data to, the Russians. I mean, he gave it to them. He gave it to Konstantin Kalimnik, who then handed it off to Oleg Deripaska. So we know that they were getting constant internal polling information from the United States so that the Russian troll farm and the Russian intelligence officers were able to pinpoint their attacks in the United States. And they were specifically given polling data on Midwestern states like Wisconsin and Minnesota and Michigan and Pennsylvania. And we know that. That's in the Mueller report. When people actually hear that or read that, they're like, I didn't know there was anything bad in there. I didn't know that they were cooperating. I didn't know that they handed in polling data. I forgot that he said Russia, if you're listening. I forgot that he asked for even more help. I forgot. Right? But in order to have the impeachment hearings, we need the witnesses, the fact witnesses. We need to hear from Don McGahn. We need to hear from Hope Hicks, who's willing to give some documents over to Congress about the campaign, nothing on the transition team, and nothing on the administration in which she served. Annie Donaldson's lawyer is saying, oh, well, the president told us we can't cooperate. Call Bannon, call Lewandowski, call Kelly, call Flynn, call Junior, call Ivanka, call Jared. On and on.
This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
The reality is that in the case of Watergate, the facts played out in a television drama. And there was no report people then had to go and get and download and get a hold of and read. In this case, what does seem to be missing is the narrative being laid out by the Democrats. Would you agree with that?
I agree completely. Number one, there were the Senate hearings that preceded all of this. And in those Senate hearings, we heard live witnesses to facts. It wasn't a summary by Mueller. It was the actual witnesses. So it would be the same as if Don McGahn testified, if Annie Donaldson testified, if Corey Lewandowski testified.
Right.
We'd hear the people who had things done to them or asked of them that were clear obstruction. That's what's needed, and it needs to be done in a form that America will understand, which is through television. Mm-hmm. And Donald Trump understands that. That is why he's fighting so hard against all the subpoenas and trying to actually continue the obstruction right now in plain sight by trying to prevent us from getting that information. It's very important that people see the evidence live.
Jill Wine-Banks, everybody. She is she was a Watergate special prosecutor. She cross-examined Nixon's secretary, Rosemary Woods, who erased or tried to erase Nixon's tape recordings that clearly showed that Nixon planned and executed the obstruction of the break-in at the Watergate Hotel to the Democratic National Committee. What we have here is a break-in into the Democratic National Committee, but this time by a foreign government's military intelligence units, the GRU, former KGB. I mean, this is Watergate, but the problem is, during 1973, Watergate took it took more than a year in order for those hearings to occur, in order for the American people to be able to see all the evidence, in order for the American people to understand that Nixon was a crook, that he was paying burglars, that the committee to reelect the president was a slush fund to pay burglars who broke in, right? It took a year from the time that those hearings started till the time Nixon was facing articles of impeachment, and then, the Republicans went and told him to resign, it was a year, 1973 to 1974. But it was on television every single day. It was on TV. And real witnesses who, Alexander Butterfield is the witness who actually said that Nixon had a taping system. We didn't know that Nixon had a taping system. In fact, when the first article of impeachment was drafted against Richard Nixon for obstruction of justice, which is what Donald Trump continues to do, thinking that no one will ever be able to hold him accountable, right? But the first article was obstruction of justice against Nixon. We hadn't even heard the tapes yet. The American people didn't even know about a taping system when that happened. Here's Elizabeth Holtzman. She was a Democrat in the House. I will say that the Democrats had the House and the Senate back then. And after we exposed Richard Nixon's criminality, Democrats won again in November.
What persuaded the Republicans before that vote and the Southern Democrats was the overwhelming evidence that exists.
And I almost feel like I want you to repeat all of that again, because we have current Democratic leadership arguing that it would endanger the Democratic members who are in pro-Trump districts if they were to proceed, even with an inquiry. They're worried about that. And they're worried that no Republicans would come over. You seem to be saying that in case of Nixon, they're misremembering history.
Correct. Or maybe they don't remember the history or they don't know it. Right. But the fact of the matter is that Southern Democrats who had very pro-Nixon districts, maybe even more pro-Nixon than many of the Republicans, voted for the impeachment. It was a very courageous act on their part. Well, I shouldn't say courageous because they were reelected. Nobody suffered a defeat, but all the Southern Democrats voted with us. And you had 6 Republicans in the first article, 7 in the second. And by the way, not only did we have such an important bipartisan vote, but the political outcome of the impeachment inquiry into Richard Nixon and the 3 articles of impeachment that we voted for resulted in, totally surprisingly, a huge Democratic landslide in the midterm elections. People forget the political consequences of it. We did it right. The American people respected what we did. They thought we protected the Constitution, and they supported us in November.
Right, because the American people don't have time to investigate whether or not their president is a criminal on their own. So you put it on the television, you present your evidence in a format like TV. People watch it. They start to, it's like that woman that said the other day, on the TV, when Justin Amash went home to Michigan and he was having a town hall in Grand Rapids, and he was explaining, as, he's a libertarian Republican. He's not, he's not a conservative Republican. He's not a fiscal he's a libertarian, okay? But when he went home and he was explaining why, after he read the Mueller report, he was joining with the Democrats to support impeachment, the audience there was stunned. I didn't know there was anything bad in the Mueller report. I've been watching Fox News, and it only said that he was exonerated. It only said good things about him. It only said that he was cleared. It didn't say anything bad. Now you're telling me there's bad things in there? Yes, I'm telling you there's bad things in there. I'm telling you there were 140 contacts between the Trump campaign and Russians. I'm telling you that when they started to investigate, the counterintelligence investigation began, Donald Trump sought to kill a counterintelligence investigation into an attack on the United States because he knew they would find that he had participated in it. I did not know that. That's why it has to be on TV. When Richard Nixon was first talked about as being a criminal and a crook, he had a 65% approval rating. Trump has a 39% approval rating. Trump cannot, I think the best approval rating he's ever had is like 42%. Nixon had a 65% approval rating when his impeachment process began. Only 19% of the United States public supported his impeachment. But after a year of these hearings, by the end, the numbers flipped. Only 24% approved of Nixon after the hearings. Bill Clinton, on the other hand, his approval ratings went up because Ken Starr was on a witch hunt. Ken Starr was despised by almost all Americans. Ken Starr was looking for a cover-up of an affair. The suborning of perjury was Bill Clinton telling Monica Lewinsky to never admit they had an affair. That was the suborning of perjury. We don't have that here. We have a Nixon situation here. Mueller is popular. The public, this is why they keep polling whether or not the public thinks that Mueller was fair. Because no one thought Ken Starr was fair. Nixon, they understood that the inquiry was fair, that he really was a crook. And then at the end, we got the tapes that proved everything John Dean said was true. But when John Dean first testified, we didn't have the tapes yet. So John Dean, it was his word against Nixon, and Nixon had a 65% approval rating. But when the end of the impeachment occurred and Alexander Butterfield said there was a taping system, we had to go to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court said the president cannot say that these are privileged. Okay? There was too much evidence of criminal activity, and you cannot claim executive privilege with corrupt intent. That's why a unanimous Supreme Court said turn over the tapes. Rosemary Wood, his secretary, tried to erase them. Jill Wine-Banks cross-examined her, and she admitted that she tried to erase the tapes. But when John Dean first testified, we didn't have the tapes. He just, it was his word against a president with a 65% approval rating. That's why it has to go forward. And that's why inherent contempt is the right way to go. Because the House doesn't need a court to do inherent contempt. The House doesn't need the Senate to do inherent contempt. And as I said, the Senate belonged to the Democrats and the House belonged to the Democrats when Richard Nixon was president. We don't have that here. The House is in Democratic hands, and so they have to take it upon themselves, and they have to hold a contempt, an inherent contempt trial. Steve Bannon, Dana Buente, Chris Christie, Michael Cohn, Rick Dearborn, Annie Donaldson, Michael Flynn, Rick Gates, Hope Hicks, John Kelly, Jared, Corey Lewandowski, Paul Manafort, who's sitting in Rikers Island as far as the New York Post is reporting. Rikers Island in solitary confinement, which for me is cruel and unusual punishment, I just have to say. Why, they can't put him in a place in Rikers where he'll be safe?